And for the first couple presentations, please hold your questions until the end of each presentation, and we will, and we'll address those then. The last presentation, we might have a more interactive question answer during the auction specifics. So with that, wanted to just go over the agenda real quickly. As you can see on your screen, we are going to have some introductions of the presenters. We're not going to go around everybody on the phone just for interest of time. And we'll have some opening remarks from our Deputy Program Manager. I will go over the PSN, the proposed sale notice, and some of the important points of that to consider. Dwight Frank will go over some of the deadlines and milestones of the process for the PSN and auction, or the whole format leading up to the sale, sorry. And Radford Chancellor will go over the overview of the fiscal terms, all the financial stuff. And lastly, Ulrika will go over the presentation of the actual format of the auction and how that's going to play out. And as a reminder, this is PSN, everything is out for comment. We are soliciting input, so if there's questions that arise or concerns with what's being proposed, we do hope that you'll submit those comments for us to consider for the final sale notice. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Annette for some opening remarks.
Thank you, Jeff. Again, my name is Annette Moore, and I'm the Deputy Program Manager for the Office of Renewable Energy Programs. I want to thank you for joining us for this webinar today, both those of you on the phone as well as here in person with us in Sterling. We really appreciate the continued interest in the Offshore Renewable Energy Program, as well as the input we receive throughout various stages of our leasing process. For those of you who may not be familiar, the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management is a bureau within the Department of the Interior. We are responsible for the energy development and mineral development on the federal outer continental shelf. We're commonly known as BOEM. That's what you'll hear us refer to ourselves as over and over, but it's Bureau of Ocean Energy Management. So to date, we've actually issued 13 offshore wind leases all along the Atlantic coast. It covers about 1.4 million acres. And on April the 6th, Secretary of the Interior Ryan Zinke announced that we would be offering 2 more lease areas offshore Massachusetts by the end of this calendar year. That would be our 8th competitive auction. We use an online auction format. And so today's seminar is going to describe the proposed auction format for that lease sale. We're going to explain the auction rules and provide you a walkthrough of the process and show you examples of how the online auction would work. I encourage you to ask any questions you may have. We want to make sure everyone is clear about how the auction would work. Following this webinar, if you have any comments about the proposed format, we're going to encourage you to also submit comments to us. If you're interested in actually participating in the auction, we're also going to talk about how you can submit your qualifications to us no later than June the 11th. So again, thank you for joining us, and I'm going to turn it back over to Jeff.
Okay, so with that, get started on the PSN. And just as a reminder, in case you're unaware or didn't see it, all of these presentations are on our webpage. They're currently up there, so good. Make sure your phone's muted, please. Bear with us, we're having a little technical loading issue right now. After a mild heart attack, maybe. Okay, so again, here I'm going to talk about the PSN. And again, my name is Jeff Browning. I'm the project coordinator for these two lease areas. So, as you're aware, the PSN, we published that on April 11th, and I'm going to go over the background of what kind of led up to the PSN and some of the contents of the PSN, which will be discussed further in detail in the next couple of presentations, and some of the next steps to be aware of. So, as many of you are aware, Massachusetts passed their Act to Promote Energy Diversity for 1,600 megawatts of offshore wind energy, which has garnered some interest to participate in their request for proposals. And their next one will be coming up in roughly June of 2019. So the intent is to have these leases auctioned off and ready to be able to participate in that. And in December and January, we had two unsolicited applications for these two lease areas that, as a further background, these two areas were previously auctioned in 2015 for the first Massachusetts sale, but they did not, they were not sold. They went with no bids. So because of that, we were able to, after these unsolicited applications came in, we were able to deem them as competitive right off the bat. Did not really have to go through all the previous processes because those have already been conducted. And we're at the stage now where we could publish the PSN and move forward towards a competitive sale. And as I mentioned, that PSN was published April 11th. You can see it on the Federal Register, docket BOEM-2018-0016. And you can submit comments through there, as well as regulations.gov using the same docket number. I will show later how to also do comments. As a reminder, so for the concept of the PSN, we talked about the lease areas, discussed if the interested parties, what they need to do to show their interest in participating, the auction formats, and one thing that's really of importance is stakeholder input. There's a few things we wanted to highlight that we're specifically seeking input on. Again, this is a proposed sale notice, and so we want input to refine for our final sale notice. As a reminder, it may be a little tough to see the numbers, but these are the two lease areas that we are planning to lease for sale. The green is OCSA 502, and the orange is OCSA 503. And they're roughly, the green one is roughly 200,000 acres, and the orange one is roughly 100,000. And for those that were not around back at the original sale, most of these areas were, we conducted a study with NREL, and the areas were divided up by prevailing wind direction. And the reason why some are larger than small is it was really based on trying to have equal areas of a certain water depth, and I believe that was at less than 30 meters or 50 meters. So the goal is to try to make each lease area to have roughly the same acreage of 50 meter depths or less. Now what I imagine most of you are here for and want to get information on. We need to have comments as well as your qualifications and interests submitted by June 11th. And this lease sale is going to be slightly different than others because we had a previous sale where we have, and the unsolicited folks, we have 3 different categories for interested entities. If you were previously qualified for the Massachusetts Atlantic Sale 4 that occurred in 2015, you do not have to submit a new qualifications package. You are qualified for these leased areas. However, we do want you to submit to us your interest that you do still plan to participate, so we will have all the qualified interested parties published in the FSN. And if there's been any changes in financial situations, technical or legal, qual cards, all that stuff, if there's been any changes, we obviously need to know that information, but we do not need a new qualification package from you. For the entities that filed their qualification materials since then, obviously the two unsolicited folks, and there's another company that has submitted their package. You do not need to submit a new package. We're already processing that or have processed that, so you're good to go in regard to that. Feel free to double check if you need to. And then anybody else that has not previously participated or has not submitted a qualification package to BOEM, and this is specifically for Massachusetts. If you were qualified for New York or North Carolina, it doesn't matter. Each qualification needs to occur for each leased area. So you will need to submit a qualification package to us by June 11th. So with also in the PSM, we've discussed the proposed auction format, and this will be discussed in much more detail in a little bit, but just some of the highlights. Auction is online and anonymous. We are proposing a multiple factor bidding with monetary, non-monetary credits. Right now the proposal is 5% credit for community benefits agreements. We are proposing a one lease per company rule. This has been instituted in other auctions such as New Jersey, where we had 2 lease areas for sale. The idea is that only one entity can win one of the lease areas. An entity cannot win both lease areas, even if they're the high bidder, and Mike will cover this more, explaining how that bidding, what you can bid on at a time and everything. Excuse me. We're going to have a $2 acre minimum bid. If you were around for the original Massachusetts sale, you'll know that this is different. That sale was a $1 an acre minimum bid. However, the $2 an acre minimum bid is on par with our other auctions, and this is just what we propose to do. And as I mentioned earlier with the different qualifications, we streamlined some of the qualifications, particularly for those that have already been previously qualified for this lease sale, by not requiring a new package to come in just because it's a new sale. And next stuff, here's another thing that's really important for us. We really do want to hear feedback from everyone on how we are proposing to go through with this auction. So with the multiple factor auction format, we're proposing the 5%. We want comments on that. Is 5% what you think is a good number? Should there be no community benefits, or how should this be a higher percentage? Should there be other non-monetary factors to consider? And with the community benefits, and if we, with this 5%, what about a cap on the non-monetary credits? Where should these be? And any input would be greatly appreciated on that. Also, lease area delineation. This is up for some discussion. We would like to hear some feedback. Just be mindful that we cannot expand these lease areas outside of their external boundaries as they are. That would require a whole new process that just would not really work for the situation. However, we could look at ideas if there's interest in making 3 lease areas, or they should be divided differently. With some of the new information that's out there, that might be something to consider. The other thing is, some issues that have come up is considering the buffers around these lease areas, or within the leases away from their external boundaries. As many of you are aware, wake effects are a consideration, and we've had some talks about who can put their turbine right on the boundary or right next to the adjacent lease, and so we want to consider if we should implement a buffer requirement on these leases. Obviously, at this point, we can't do it for other leases that have already been executed, but It's something that's come up since, and we want to consider that. And next, these are the couple of the main timelines for to consider. Again, comments need to be submitted electronically or postmarked by June 11th. And just as a note, for the qualifications packages, we need those to come in, and as we review, if we do have to request more information, we will be in touch with you to do that during the review period. The next, our goal is to have the final sale notice published in October, and the lease sale will be roughly in December, which would lead to an executed lease roughly February 2019. And this should give ample time for the new lessees to prepare for if they're interested. We assume they would be for the next round of the Massachusetts RFP that should be made public or requested in June 2019. So as a reminder, submitting comments, regulations.gov using the docket number BOEM-2018-0016, and in written form, you can submit them to our office. Qualification materials need to be submitted via mail. You can obviously email them to me. My contact information will be up in just a second, but we would need the hard copies as well. And here's my contact information. It will be up in a little bit again after the end of this presentation, but feel free to reach out to me. That's also the webpage that has the information on, has the proposed sale notice posted, the bidder financial forms, and the proposed leases. And other information regarding these two lease areas are on that webpage as well. And so with that, if we have any questions, go ahead and unmute your phone and speak up. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next presentation. I'm going to go ahead and open it up to make sure it loads this time. All right, not hearing any phone chatter, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Wright Frank.
Good morning. My name is Wright Frank. I will be the auction manager for this lease sale, which we're calling ATLW4A. ATLW4 was the first Massachusetts lease sale. Get right into it. I just scroll.
Oh, sorry.
Click on the arrow.
Oh, this one?
No, right here.
Oh, what did he call
Yeah,
it?
don't rotate it.
Okay. Yeah, not bad. All right, so basically in this presentation, I'm going to walk through what happens between now and the moment we have an executed lease and kind of all the steps that need to happen in that process. So on April 11th, actually a little before now, April 11th was when we published the proposed sale notice in the Federal Register. That opened up a 60-day comment period, and that is still open right now. That will stay open until June 11th. And that's when the comment period closes. And during this time, we are accepting and processing new company qualifications. As Jeff discussed a little bit, the qualifications, because this is the second half of an already started lease sale, the qualifications process is a little more complicated than it is sometimes, but if you think about it kind of intuitively, it makes sense. If you participate in the other sale, you don't need to go through the entire process again. We're talking about 4A, not some other lease sale, just 4A for Massachusetts, or just 4 for Massachusetts. You just need to tell us that you're still interested, because that was a long time ago, and when you look over the list of companies that was qualified for that lease sale, I don't know how many of them are still active. So if you have never talked to us about any lease sale, or if you've only participated in other states' lease sales, you need to come through and do the full qualifications process. And if we only processed your qualifications packages recently because you just submitted unsolicited applications for these areas, then you're taken care of, and we know who you are. So that brings us to April 26th, which is today, the auction seminar. Okay, so once the comment period closes, okay, we will, actually, this is a little deceptive. Between this slide and this slide, there's a passage of time. We close the comment period, and then after it's closed, we need to read all of your comments. We need to process them, summarize them, brief them to our management, look for all the fantastic ideas that you've given us for how to change the actual sale, implement those into a final sale notice document, get that cleared off through our management and our management's management, up as far as it needs to be done and then published in the Federal Register. That process will take a couple months. It's very difficult to say how many months, but it will take some time. But we'll get there. We'll publish the final sale notice in the Federal Register, and that notice will contain all of these dates that say TBD in green on this slide. So it'll tell you when the bidder's financial forms are due. That form, affectionately known as the BFF, contains. That's where you tell us who's going to be participating in the lease sale, who's going to be submitting the bids, who's authorized to bind your company in this lease sale. And it will also tell us who we need to send authentication tokens to, who we need to invite to the mock auction, a bunch of other things like that. Then the next, and that's typically, I think, a week or two after the final sale notice. So it's not too soon to start thinking about that before we publish that notice, because that's a pretty quick deadline. Then typically maybe another couple weeks later, maybe 3 to 4 weeks after the final sale notice, there'll be the time will be published in the final sale notice that tells you when your non-monetary packages are due. The non-monetary package is just the package in which you submit to us the information needed to establish that you have a community benefits agreement. That's what we're talking about there. So I think we ask you to submit the file, submit the actual agreement so we can look at it and make sure it meets the qualification, the criteria that we published in the final sale notice. At that same time, typically the bid deposit is also due, and there'll be procedures. You know, we'll explain in the notices how to submit the bid deposits. I think it's in Regulations Up. Yeah, it's an honor. Somehow, it'll be in the notice. Pay.gov. Sorry, it is Pay.gov. Okay, so and those two things, that deadline is usually the same for the non-monetary package due date and the bid deposit due date. Sometime between then and the auction, our auction panel will get together and review the non-monetary packages to determine whether or not they meet the criteria in the final sale notice to get the credit that we've announced. Once we've determined who is eligible for that credit, assuming we keep the credit in the final sale notice, we will notify each company as to their status on whether or not they will have the credit in the lease sale. We do not tell you, if you were a bidder, we do not tell you whether or not your competitors also have, or how many competitors also have big credits. All you know is that you do or don't. Then the next deadline is the mock auction. This is only for bidders who are eligible to participate at that point in the sale. It's really just to run through how the software works, to work out any kinks there are, and logins and passwords, and before the actual sale day, because we don't want to waste our time on sale day worrying about authentication and getting logged into the system and how to use it. So we'll run through a sale, we'll do a fake lease sale for a mock lease, and congratulations to whoever wins that. And then and we hold that very close to the actual auction day, because we don't want people forgetting what they learned at the run-through. And then we hold the auction, which brings us to auction day. Here's the auction day slide. At the time we publish in the Federal Register, we will enable logins, so bidders can start logging into the system that's some time before the first round is going to open. And then then you see this start. It says start here. At some point, we will open the first round for bidding. We will publish the starting prices. We've said the minimum bid is $2 an acre, so there's the math on that. It's a little under $500,000 for one, a little under $300,000 for the other. And you will indicate yes or no whether you are willing to pay that price. There is a limitation. You can only bid on one or the other at a time. You can't bid on both, and that's how we enforce the one per customer rule. That's partly how we enforce the one per customer rule. It is technically, if you go through all the possibilities, technically there are ways that you could win both if you do that, but we've put in an extra rule saying that we were not going to let that happen. So you're going to walk away with one maximum lease area. The lease areas should be more than large enough to support a very sizable offshore wind development. So the first round is a little longer. You'll see that in here. It's 30 minutes. It'll stay open for 30 minutes, and really your job during those 30 minutes is very simple. It's either to click one lease area or the other to say that you're interested in that lease. The round will close. There's usually a short pause, maybe 5 minutes or less or so, while we kind of process the results and see what came in, and then we will post the results. So if you're participating, if you submitted a live bid in the first round of the lease sale, you will be able to access an information screen that Ulrika will tell you about in a few minutes. That will tell you. We're getting some feedback. If people should mute your computer or phone.
Whoever just signed in, probably.
Perfect. Whatever you did just worked. Oh, well, you look like you hung up. Okay. So at that point, we'll post round 2 asking prices. So the results you will see, you won't see who is who. You'll see the number of other companies that submitted live bids. Meaning, when I say a live bid, it means a full price bid. You won't see who those companies are, who your competition is, or anything. Just the number of people, which is gives you an idea of the level of relative demand in the lease sale at that point. And we will also post the next round's asking price. The bid increment, that is the difference between the first round price and the second round price, that is in BOEM's discretion, and we will try to choose increments to move the sale along at a good pace without raising it so high we blow by everybody's highest bid point. So that's kind of the balance we're trying to do there. We may raise bid prices by more in the first couple rounds to try to, if we think that it looks like there's robust interest in those first rounds. But that is a process that's fully within our discretion. And then we'll open up round 2, and then you'll have somewhat less time to submit a bid that time, because really your job is pretty simple here. You just need to say whether you're still interested in it at the published prices, and if you're not, you'll have an opportunity to submit what's called an exit bid, and Ulrika will get into the details on that as well. And so that's the process that repeats. We update the website and open up a new round until there's 1 or 0 live bids, that means full price bids on each lease area that we're offering. When there's a maximum of 1 person interested in each lease area, the auction will end. That is a triggering condition for the end of the sale. Okay, so now the auction, the bidding has closed. BOEM will, probably within an hour or so, hold a press call and announce the provisional auction winner. The auction panel, which you'll remember from as the group that looked at the non-monetary bids, they will meet a second time after the lease sale closed to validate the results, and then we will email the results to the Department of Justice, and they have a statutorily mandated 30 days in which they can review the results of the lease sale for antitrust issues. We've never had any antitrust issues. I don't anticipate any antitrust issues, but don't do anything to tempt them. So after we hear back from the Department of Justice, we will refund the bid deposits of the non-winners and send a lease copy to the winner. Once we send a lease copy, or actually 3 lease copies to the winner, they will have 10 business days to file their financial assurance, pay the rest of their bid, and we say the balance because it'll be whatever they bid minus the $450,000 bid deposit that they submitted for the sale, and sign and return the lease copies. That is a fairly tight turnaround, and it may make sense to at least do a little investigation during the DOJ waiting period. Talk to some bond companies or talk to us about how you want to submit your financial assurance so that you that doesn't turn into a problem when you are on the clock. And once we receive those 3 lease copies back and we can check all the boxes, we will execute the lease on behalf of the government, and we'll have a new lessee, another 2 lessees in Massachusetts, hopefully. And that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, so with that, we're going to move on.
Oh yeah, I didn't formally ask, but if there's any questions,
yeah,
it's
any
gonna be a good
questions?
time.
Sorry. Okay, no questions on the auction stuff from Wright? All right. We'll move on and let Radford take over to talk about some of the fiscal terms.
Okay, thank you. I'm Radford Schatz at Bohm, and I'm going to say a few words about the payments for the lease after you've won it, and when I'm finished, I think we'll go back and talk more about the auction. So the payments we're going to talk about are the lease rent, the easement rent, the operating fee when you start producing, and the financial assurance requirements. For the basic formula for the lease rent payment is the lease acreage times $3 per acre. And we actually show you here the calculated rental that you would pay when you first receive your lease, your first lease payment, in terms of the which is published in the proposed notice of sale. But basically, the lease rental is an annual payment. The first year's payment is due within 45 days of receiving the lease. Subsequent payments are due on the anniversary of that time when the lease was executed, on the portion of the lease that's not being authorized for production under the COP. And subsequent rent payments might reflect adjustments for any relinquished acreage or phase development. And as far as the easement goes, for the transmission line primarily, you have a formula, $70 per statute mile times the number of statute miles and a 200-foot wide transmission easement. If that payment is due upon approval of the COP, and subsequent payments are due annually thereafter, calculating from that date until the lease terminates. If you need and are approved for additional easement acreage or a substation or whatever, the payment for that area is the greater of $5 per acre or $450 per year. So that's rentals. As for the annual operating fee, the basic concept here is that it's based on the annual power output valued at the preceding year's wholesale power price multiplied by a fee rate. And I'll talk about this in detail now. There's several components. Basic formula you have here, the annual operating fee is equal to the capacity times the hours per year times the capacity factor times the power price we use times the rate. Capacity, is the planned available capacity in megawatts. It's based on the COP. Capacity factor is initially set at a factor of 0.4, and then for the first 6 years of commercial operations. And then that value can be adjusted in 5-year intervals after that to reflect actual meter generation over the preceding 5 years. Power price is determined when the payment is due, and is based on the latest available regional wholesale spot price adjusted for inflation. In the proposed notice, it's proposed that we would use the power price for the Northeast Massachusetts hub. This is something that you can comment on if you wish. As for the operating fee rate, it's set at 0.02 through the life of commercial operations on the lease. So here's an example. Suppose you have a 500 megawatt capacity. When you're operating at that capacity, if it's 500 times the annual operating fee is 500 times the hours per year times 0.4 capacity factor times the power price, which in this example is assumed to be $40 per megawatt hour, times the operating fee rate, is again 0.02. So with these assumptions, your annual operating fee would be $1,401,600. One more thing to say about the operating fee. The initial fee is due within 45 days of the start of commercial operations. Subsequent payments are due annually on or before the lease execution anniversary date. And the last topic to talk about is the financial assurance requirements. All I want to say about that is that there's a $100,000 initial financial assurance due prior to lease issuance in the form of a bond or some other approved form. Additional assurance may be required to cover decommissioning, operating fees, other obligations as the lease progresses. It may be required prior to approval of a SAP, prior to approval of a COP, commencement of installation of facilities, if there are past due amounts, or any other adjustments to the financial assurance amounts. So as I mentioned, we welcome comments on the wholesale power price that we would use over the life of the lease to calculate the operating fee, and any other aspect of the payments that you'd like to comment on, we would welcome those. If you have any questions about the operating fees, in addition to the other people on the team, we just send those to Bill Anderson at this address.
Okay, with that, does anyone have any questions on the fiscal terms of the proposed lease? Everyone is waiting to hear from you, Ulrika. Okay, we'll have it up. And do you want to allow them to just ask questions throughout, or what's the...
We can do that. If there are questions during the presentation, feel free to pose them.
Okay.
So my name is Ulrika Braunert, and I am with Power Auctions, who is the contractor conducting or helping BOEM to conduct this auction. And so you know what the auction is all about. It's about those 2 lease areas that were not sold at the previous auction. And the auction design is a ascending clock auction. So clock actually is another word for round. And Wright has already given a good introduction to how this format works. So the auction is conducted in a series of rounds during which bidders place bids. The round gets processed, prices get raised since it's an ascending auction, and then the next round starts. So this slide was supposed to kind of load in stages, so I'm afraid it's a little bit of visual overload at this point, but let me try and walk you through it. So it is a schematic to try and explain this format. So we have a round one, then asking price for round one, and you see here is the number of bidders who are in this kind of single item auction. So this is a slightly simplified format of this type of auction, and I will, after we've gone through this slide, explain some of the differences for the Massachusetts auction. So bear with me, this is a single item, and we have 5 bidders who are vying for it. So at the first round asking price, we have all bidders are still interested. They place bids at the asking price. Then the bids are processed, the price is raised, and in the second round, all 5 bidders are still happily bidding. They're still bidding the asking price. Again, processing will happen, price increases, and here you see that one of the bidders has reached its budget, quite likely, and this is the highest price that they are willing to bid. So at this point, they place an exit bid, which is also sometimes referred to as an intra-round bid, and so they are at this point no longer able to bid in the next round. But we still have 4 active bidders at the round 3 asking price. Now the next round comes up, the asking price is so the price is raised. We have 2 more bidders who have reached their budgets and who have elected to place an exit bid. It's kind of important to say, should there be no other live bids at this point, these exit bids would stand a chance of actually being the winning bid. So it is quite wise to place exit bids rather than not bidding anymore once you've reached an asking price. So at these exit bids, if there were no live bids, the highest one of those would be the provisional winner of the item. Now, but let's keep going. We have 2 live bidders are left in the race. The price is raised again, and 1 other bidder places an exit bid, and we have 1 final bidder who would be the winner of the item. Right? So let's go through some of the differences that the Massachusetts auction has. Again, I'm just repeating some of what has already been said, but it's useful to kind of remember it. We are dealing with 2 lease areas, but it has been proposed that the bidder can only bid for 1 lease area at a time and can win at most 1 lease area. In round, unfortunately, some of my writing has disappeared. So in round 1, it's very similar to the kind of schematic that you showed you. The bidder can place a live bid on either of the 2 lease areas. In subsequent rounds, the bidder can freely switch between 1 lease area and another. So he can place, if he placed a bid on lease area 0502, in the next round he can actually switch his bid to 0503. But there is a particular constraint, and the constraint is that he has to have a contested live bid for the lease area in the previous round. Now let me tell you what that is. Contested just means that in the previous round there has to have been competition for the lease area he was bidding on. So if he is the only standing bidder for that lease area, he cannot switch. So he has to stay on that same lease area, and BOEM will automatically carry forward his bid on that lease area at the old price, but into the new round. And he will basically be stuck on that until there is another round in which another bidder decides to bid for that particular leased area. That will then free this bidder up to place bids on either of the leased areas. Again, he can switch if he so wishes at a new asking price. So exit bids tend to work the same way as in the single item auction. So they are really what the name suggests, exits. So in this case, if a bidder places an exit bid on either of the lease areas, he won't be able to bid on either of lease area in a future round. So, but similar to switching bids, exit bids can only be submitted for a lease area if the bidder has a live bid in the previous round, and that live bid has to be contested. So, but it's interesting or good to note that not being able to do anything when you're the sole bidder is actually a good thing because the price doesn't go up. And so you have a good chance of getting a lease area relatively cheaply. I want to say a little bit too about winner determination. So all of this is laid out in the sale notices. But so the provisional winning bid for a lease area is the highest bid, and this can be either a live bid or an exit bid. And there is a possibility that there is a tie, in which case BOEM resolves that by randomized means. So a tie can happen in two ways. Either the last bids were live bids in the previous round that were placed by more than one bidder. That's number one. Or number two, they were identical exit bids for a leased area in the final round. Note again, as I mentioned before, it is advisable to not just stop bidding. And it's also advisable if you place an exit bid to not place a round bid. So not like a big number with lots of zeros behind it, because that will help you to avoid ties. So if you're really interested in the lease area, make your number fairly crooked, and that at least it's unlikely to tie in this case. So now, Wright mentions that there's a possibility that the above rules would lead to one bidder being theoretically the winner for both lease areas, and that BOEM says this is not going to happen, and they have a particular way to deal with this. And it's according to the sale notice, BOEM only accepts the most recent bid submitted by the bidder and awards the other leased area to the next highest bidder. So there is a procedure in place. Now let's have a look at the actual auction mechanics. Now if I might not have said it, but the schematic before was really the most important slide for you to go back to and understand if you want to have a handle on how this auction works. This, on the other hand, is probably the least interesting and least important slide, but for information purposes, we've kind of added it. It just shows, this nice sort of fluffy gray thing is the internet. There is a server and a backup server, and there's basically the auction is cloned onto the backup server, so if one of them, if there's any disaster, the backup server picks up exactly where the server left off, and auction manager, BOEM, and all bidders are connected to the server through their own individualized computers, and they have access to it at a prearranged time. So, sorry. So this is just for information. I'm not going to go through it, but it is the requirements are basically minimum sort of standard issue for any self-respecting modern computer. And what I would like to emphasize a little bit, it's recommended to have backup facilities. So make sure you have a secondary means to access the internet. mobile wireless card and whatever else is out there. And also, this is very important, there should be more than one authorized individual to bid for your company. Generally, it's a good idea to have one person bid and the other people be there just in case something happens to the computer of person number one or there is some other sort of emergency. Now, again, this was supposed to pop up one little bullet at a time, but we can deal with it like this. So this is just another little review of the mechanics of the clock auction. So we have our auctioneer announces a schedule for the clock rounds, and so the round opens. During the round, the bidder is presented with a list of the auction items, in this case our 2 lease areas, and the associated clock prices. Now the bidder ticks the box indicating that they're willing to bid the asking price for one of the 2 items, or since this also refers to exit bid, so starting with round 2, they could submit an exit bid, which is a bid amount between the previous round asking price and the current round asking price. Now, obviously, in each round, the bidder has to comply with all the rules, with the activity rules to continue participating in the auction. If he places an exit bid, as we said, he's out. So when the time expires, the round closes, the auctioneer determines, so the round closes here, then the auctioneer evaluates the bids and determines that the auction should close. And we said there should be excess demand for at least one of the lease areas that keeps the auction open. So the price ticks up, auctioneer releases the information that that bidders are allowed or entitled to, which is how many live bids there were in the previous round and the next round's price. Again, one slight caveat, if you decide not to bid at all in round 1, you also don't get these kind of information. So you need to bid at least in round 1 in order to still have access to the system with this type of information. So now let's look at what is actually, let's look at the system that you will be accessing. So the first screen is the home page, and note a lovely photograph. I think it's of one of Bohm's own, right? And it's of the Deepwater Wind Farm. Yeah, possibly. But I was led to believe that. So the picture, as you can see, there is a link. There is a link that you click as soon as at the kind of prearranged time, and that gets you into the auction. And these are first just the bidders that you will be encountering in this demonstration. Bob & Co. company is the main character, and unless there is another, in the little blue band, unless there's another name, Bob is the one whose screen we're looking at. Those are the screens that all bidders have in common, and also sort of generic ways of placing a bid. Adam is set up with a bid credit. We will, Wright and Jeff have already mentioned that there is a possibility of a bid credit. So we've set the auction up just to demonstrate what the screens would look like if you had a bid credit. And there's a couple of additional bidders, and some of them, they're set up to demonstrate different parts of the auction. So this is as soon as you click your link on the nice windmill picture, you will be on a login page, and to keep this area safe from sort of any unauthorized access, there is 2-factor authentication used, and you need to enter the following: a username in this first little box, a password, and a token code. Now, username, password, and token code will be issued to qualified bidders, and I'll go over that a little bit later as well. Now, so you log in and you find yourself in the system. Mind, the auction has not started at this point. but there are some of the screens that are informative and can be accessed at this point and give you some information, obviously. The first is the auction schedule. So shown here is a is a representative schedule. I think Wright mentioned before that schedules are very much at the discretion of BOEM. There usually is one set up, so when you access the system, you see a schedule, but there are possibilities that it can be changed. And the one that we're showing here is quite probably different from the one in the monetary auction. But it shows rounds, this is the gray part, and recesses, which is the time when processing happens. And it shows quite a number of rounds here with their start times and their end times. So, should BOEM decide during an auction, let's say there's an earthquake or something like that, bidders will be notified via the messaging system that there's a change in the auction. And if all else fails, necessary or notified by any means possible, they'll find out about it. And the auction will be, the schedule will be changed, so it's always advisable to go to it once more. Now, the other screen that you can access before is a static screen with auction info. So information about the auction as a whole, so the two lease areas, the eligibility you need for them, and the opening prices. Then there is your personalized, so you click on this other little tab, and there's the personalized information that shows you your eligibility, which in this case is relatively uncomplicated. It's 1, and there's no other possibilities. And also, this I can't read at this distance, but it just shows you if you have a percentage credit. Now, let me just repeat a little bit of the information from before. This is a proposed credit, and the auction is set up with one just for demonstration purposes. So since we are dealing with a multi-factor auction format, if for bidders who have actually satisfied the criteria that I established in the final sale notice, they would see a number here, and quite likely 5, which is what has been proposed so far. So the cash bid makes up the portion of the bid that is not covered by the non-monetary credit. So summed together, the variables comprise the ad bid price, and we'll see that later on the pertinent screens. So the effect would be you receive a 5% discount on the asking price for the lease area 1, subject, and that was the other thing that is being proposed, a maximum dollar amount cap, if that is adopted. So, so much for the auction info. There, another screen that at this point will bear some important information is the messages screen. Messages can be accessed at any time of the auction, and it really is a means to communicating with the auction manager and with BOEM. And at this point, you will most likely find some announcements that give some information about the auction. So these, all the text there is purely illustrative. So don't think this is what you're going to see. Again, bidders can communicate with BOEM, with the auction manager via this messaging system. They can at any point ask questions, and they will be assured of an answer. And this is what they see when they have received an answer. They can click on this particular link, and that opens up the entire conversation stream. So, as I said, this is one of the really important parts of support that the auction manager and BOEM offer is through this messaging system. So now comes the kind of central screen, which is where bids are being placed. So you see that, this is the part where bids are placed. There's some information, the lease areas. There is, as you can see, at the moment there's these little boxes on which you can place, that you can tick. And as soon as you tick them, you'll find that these things that now say 0 will fill in. And there is the difference between the as-bid price and the cash bid. If you have no bid credit, then those will be identical. If there's a bid credit, then this one will be lower. You also have a round clock that advises how much time there is for bidding. And bidding can happen during the entire length of the round. There is no advantage to place your bids early or to place them late. It's the last bid that has been placed is the one that the system acknowledges as the final bid. So let's have this guy place a bid. So in this case, he can place only one bid, and the system aids you in that by graying out the other possibilities. So as soon as your bid is placed, this is it. You can, though, during the round, if you decide you want to change, you can change your bid. You can kind of, unclick this one, then click the other one, unclick that one, click this one again. And so it's, you're not tied to your first kind of click actions, if we can say it like that. Now, this screen, this is the confirmation screen. So this one, and I can't emphasize this enough, is a really important screen for your own records. And so basically your boss will want you to generate the screen, print it, and put it in the binder or frame it, just to have a record on the way, on what you have actually, on the bid that you have placed. So it is your confirmation, and it's kind of, if you go back to your bidding screen and you change your bid, you also have to generate another bid confirmation. But this is the final one that you want. So as I said, there is both on the generate bid confirmation and on the bidding screen, there is this line for the imputed credit, which would have a number in it, and it will be 5% until a cap is reached, if a cap is adopted. Now, our round has closed, and the results are being processed, and so at some point then the auction manager will post the results, and there are two different screens that you can access. One gives you more your personalized kind of information, so this is the My Results screen, and they are shown. So this shows the status of the bidder himself. So it shows which bid they placed and what the cash bid or the as-bid price was. And the other screen, the other information that the bidder can get is demand. In other words, how many live bids there were placed. They have no idea who placed them, and they should not. But they have get the idea of the number. So this is demand quite, this is very prettily laid out, and obviously in the first round it's not quite as informative, but in later rounds, and I will show that, you get a good history of the demand for the lease areas. The other screen that kind of doubles this information but adds something else, you still have the aggregate demand here. While the next prices have not been announced, this is not available, but as soon as the prices are announced, you see the kind of price history of these areas. This screen at the moment shows some sort of random increment. please be advised that as Wright pointed out, the increments are really at the discretion of BOEM, and there are certain things that factor into how they are set, and he's already laid those out. So don't pay any great attention to the increments that we have here on the slide. They're just purely sort of illustrative to let you know that yes, the prices will go up at a certain rate that BOEM decides. Let me go on to the next one. So another mode to get information is downloads. The download screens can be accessed throughout the entire auction, and there will be one further download when the auction concludes, which is like my final results. And you basically just click on them, you download it, and you can filter, and there's all kinds of ways to deal with them. Now, our auction now we're advancing it. It has advanced to round 2, so you see this is a little more interesting. Our bidders still, since the prices are probably quite low, are still happy to place the live bids for both of these areas. And starting with round 2, exit bids can be placed. But I will show all this in round 3. We'll just walk through the kind of different bids that can be placed. So this is the current bid screen before a bid is placed. And you see it's changed with regard to round 1. So we have one other column here which allows for an exit bid. You again have the little boxes that you can click for a live bid, and you can click either this one or that one, so you can switch, or you can click here for an exit bid. Now we'll have a look at our bidder Bob, who just clicks a live bid, and then I think if I remember that correctly, he changes his mind and he switches, and he can because, as you remember from the demand, there was plenty of demand for both lease areas, or for the lease area that he had been on before. So, and he then looks at his bid confirmation, which tells him that yes, I did not place the last bid I placed is actually for the second lease area here. So that is his confirmation. And I can also quickly point out there is a nice reminder that if the round starts drawing to a close, the round clock will turn red, just as you should probably make sure that your bids are in place. So this is our bidder Adam, and he was the one, if you remember, we set him up with a 5% bid credit, and here you see there's the price that he bid. There is the 5% bid credit, and that is his cash bid, which is obviously lower. So if you wanted to place an exit bid, this is our bidder Diana. She is beginning to reach her, basically reach her budget. So this is again what the screen looks like before, but she's gonna click here. So as she clicks, this little bidding box opens, and you see if you start entering something in that is not a valid bid, you get this nice little red warning or a hint as to what you should be bidding. It's also kind of helpful in the range of what can be bid is actually on this little bidding box. You have to bid something that's between the last round's asking price and this round's asking price. And as long as you do that, you can place your bid. So here the bid is placed, and then you click save. And there is a kind of advisement that you place an exit bid, so it's like in red, just to make sure that you're aware of the fact. I have not mentioned that there are some little informative little things up there for activity, eligibility, and eligibility next round. In this case, you notice when you place a live bid, your activity will say 1. When you place an exit bid, it says 0, and you also find out that your eligibility next round is 0, so you can't bid anymore in the next round. So when Diana gets her bid confirmation, there are actually quite a number of warnings to say that are you really sure? There is this little the yellow box. There is a note on top of the table. It's moved over to this side here that your eligibility is 0, and so note that nobody will know except for yourself and BOEM that you placed an exit bid. I mean, nobody can see this exit bid. It's only the bidder himself can see the exit bid. So now the round closes. Again, it's posted. The next round prices are announced. Again, please, be mindful of the increments, which are, oh, hang on, they're here, right? The increments which are purely illustrative. But you see all rounds listed, and you get some sort of nice history of the pricing. In my results for Bob, who placed a live bid, you can see actually in the round here that he switched his bid. So that is sort of one indication. And the exit bid, the Diana who placed the exit bid will see her exit bid listed here, which lease area it was for and what the prices were. Right. When now the next round starts and Diana tries to place more bids, and she gets on the current bid screen and she gets this message that she can no longer place bids, that basically she's finished with the auction. Now we are progressing the auction a little bit further. Now we have 5 rounds, and you can see that this demand screen really becomes quite informative. And I'd like to point out, sort of up at the end of round 5, we have demand of 2 for the first lease area and demand of 1 for the second lease area. So the bidder who is sitting on that will face the kind of constraints in bidding that we've talked about earlier. So so here we have the after round 5 and round 6 prices are announced. You see again the price history. And now we're getting to the final round of this of our demonstration auction. And our bidder, Chris, who has been bidding quite faithfully on lease area 1, that's the one he's been interested in. He still places a live bid. He is still interested in it. Our bidder B if he likes to switch, he can't, and he gets the message why he can't, because the bid was not contested in the previous round. So he is bidding for this second lease area, but as you notice, the price has not gone up. Price is still at, I think, round 5 it was. So Adam has reached his budget. He places an exit bid, and so the auction, the round is ended and posted, and that concludes the auction, because there's only one bidder per lease area, so demand is 1 for both of the lease areas. And so my results, this is the my results screen for somebody who won a lease area. So it says congratulations. We're all being very polite and nice about this. And it just says, that there's still some BOEM processing that will have to happen. But you are basically the provisional winning winner for this lease area. Bob gets a similar message, and you see how he switched his bids, and you also see the kind of price history here that the price stayed same. and the person who did not win, which is Adam, and all the others who were bidding in this particular auction will get this kind of screen saying, you were not a winner for this particular area, but thanks for participating. And I think this is the end for a look at what the system looks like. Sorry to end it on a sad note for the one who did not win, but I just want to say a little more about the kind of bidder preparation. As you saw on the login screen, there are various ways, various credentials you need in order to log in, and they're sent via FedEx, and a signature is required. We try to make sure that there is absolutely no way in which this can be compromised. So each authorized individual is assigned a user ID, a password, and a hardware token. So user IDs and passwords are sent to the authorized individuals, and the hardware tokens are sent to the point of contact for the bidder. So there is one caveat or one exception, that if the bidder has authorized bidders in different countries, then we have, or BOEM has decided that we can send the tokens to the authorized individuals personally, rather than sending it to one person. They have to spread it over all kinds of countries. Then there will be a user guide that is available online and can be accessed via a link and it is accessible to bidders who have been bidders who are going to be participating and who have their login credentials. So authorized individuals are granted access to the auction system for the mock auction and the monetary, which we sometimes refer to as a live auction, but I think it's referred to in the sale notices as the monetary auction. So Jeff, who is it? Somebody, you already said something about the mock auction, and it's kind of a training session, might have been right, that is scheduled just prior to the auction to provide bidders with an opportunity to test their login credentials and to just become really familiar with the system, look at all the screens, practice to place bids without the danger of losing a lot of money. So there will generally, we have some fake bidders in the mock auctions, so it's usually quite a lively and fun auction to participate in. And bidders should really use the same computer and connections that they will use for the live auctions. And the mock auction will stay anonymous. What happens at the mock auction stays at the mock auction. And but it's also a good way to practice, the support system by telephone and messaging facility, and also we will practice the backup. Usually we practice one round where backup methods of placing bids are practiced through a fax system, and there is a procedure in place that you can kind of read about. And that will be practiced during the mock auction. The live or monetary auction, that will also occur remotely over the internet from the various offices where bidders are. And I already mentioned it's quite wise to have a single authorized bidder who deals with most of the bidding at the auction and just have the other two individuals as backups. So this is just, legalized things, submission subject to the constraints of the auction rules, and there will the support that you will have encountered during the mock auction is also there during the live auction. And the final sales notice, there has been some idea when this is going to come out, and all the details when the mock and the monetary auctions are going to happen, that will be announced in that final sale notice. And probably I don't need to emphasize that it is very important reading for any prospective bidder. because it's basically it's a summary of everything that has been said so far. So this is the end of the a look at the auction system.
Okay, excuse me. And with that, does anyone have any questions for Ulrika, or just general questions overall? Don't forget to unmute your phone, otherwise you're talking to yourself. Everyone's ready to start the auction tomorrow. Let's see if there's anyone's trying to chat by chance. Nope. Okay, well, there's the contact information for me, and then the other information, as I mentioned earlier, the presentations are on at that web address. And also I'd like to ask, since this was the first auction seminar via webinar, if you wouldn't mind, if you have any comments or if there's any issues you had, if you wouldn't mind reaching out to me and letting me know, just for us to refine this if necessary, and go from there. The auction seminar has been recorded, and we will be posting that in a timely manner on the webpage as well, for you to refer back to. And just with that, though, I was going to let Ned, if you had any just closing remarks, anything else you wanted to touch base on?
Just again wanting to thank everybody for their participation today, and please know we really would like to hear from you if you have any comments or suggestions on the format or anything in the PSN. That helps us a lot as we try to go through this leasing process. So all this information will be online and available to you. Please feel free to contact Jeff or anyone else with your comments. His information is still up on the screen. And if you go to the BOEM website underneath the Massachusetts State page, you'll be able to find the information on the proposed sale notice. And again, thank you for taking time to attend this webinar. And we do look forward to hearing any comments that you have. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, everyone, thank you, and just also thank everyone, a couple folks that showed up in person. Appreciate you making the trip, and everyone here is staff level of the presenters, and some of the folks that really helped me get this thing up and running. So thanks, everyone, and look forward to